The large metal room buzzed with strange sounds. Clicking noises came from the alien soldiers as they watched the big screen in front of them. Commander Vexahol stood tall on his forelegs, pointing at the moving pictures with one of his long arms. "Look at these weak creatures," he said, his voice making a scratching sound. "They call themselves fighters, but watch what they do." The screen showed old videos from Earth. Human soldiers ran across open fields while enemy guns fired at them. Many fell, but others kept running forward. The alien students made more clicking sounds, which meant they were laughing. "These humans have no sense," said Pilot Kethra. She wiped green liquid from her big round eyes. "Why would they run toward the guns? Any smart creature would hide or run away." Commander Vexahol changed the picture on the screen. Now it showed humans with knives on their guns, charging at metal machines that shot fire. This is what humans do when they fight. They make up stories about brave warriors who win impossible battles. They tell lies about small groups beating huge armies. More laughter filled the room. The alien soldiers found it very funny that humans would make up such silly stories. They thought humans were weak and needed to tell lies to feel better about themselves. "Commander," said another student, "do humans really believe these stories are true?" "Of course they do," Vexahol replied. "They are too simple to understand that these things never really happened. No one warrior can defeat a whole army. No small group can win against thousands of enemies. These are just dreams that weak creatures tell themselves." In the back corner of the room sat Captain Jake Morrison. He was the only human in the Galactic Defense Corps training program. His brown hair was starting to turn gray at the sides, and his face had lines from many years of military service. He wore the same blue uniform as the other officers, but he looked very different from all the tall, strange creatures around him. Jake had been listening to these talks for weeks now. Every day, the alien instructors would show videos of human battles and laugh at them. They thought humans were foolish for fighting when they should have given up. They did not understand why humans would keep fighting even when they could not win. The other students always looked at Jake when they talked about humans. They wanted to see if he would get angry or try to argue with them. But Jake just sat quietly and listened. He had learned long ago that sometimes it was better to stay silent and let others talk. "The humans have many of these false stories," Vexahol continued, changing the screen again. "They tell about a place called Thermopylae, where they say 300 soldiers held back hundreds of thousands of enemies. Impossible. They speak of the Alamo, where a small group fought against a huge army. Lies! They have stories about Rorke's Drift, where they claim 150 men beat 4,000 warriors. Complete nonsense." The alien students clicked and chittered more. They thought it was very funny that humans would make up such obvious lies. Some of them turned to look at Jake, waiting for him to say something. Vexahol noticed the students looking at Jake. He smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Captain Morrison," he called out, "you are the only human here. Perhaps you would like to tell us about these wonderful stories your people love so much? Please share these amazing tales of impossible victories." All the alien students turned to stare at Jake. The room became very quiet. Jake could feel dozens of strange eyes watching him. He slowly stood up from his chair. Even standing, he was shorter than most of the sitting aliens around him. "With respect, Commander," Jake said in a calm voice, "I would rather not waste everyone's time with old stories." This made the aliens laugh even harder. They thought Jake was admitting that the stories were lies. They were happy that at least this human was smart enough to know the truth. "Very wise, Captain," Vexahol said, his voice full of satisfaction. "At least you understand reality. Your people may tell foolish stories, but you know better than to believe them." Jake sat back down without saying anything more. The aliens kept laughing and making jokes about human stories. They talked about how humans were dreamers who could not face the truth about their own weakness. "The problem with humans," said another instructor, "is that they cannot accept when they are beaten. Instead of surrendering like sensible creatures, they keep fighting until they are all dead. Then they make up stories about how their deaths meant something important." "Exactly," agreed Vexahol. They call it honor or courage, but it is really just stupidity. A smart fighter knows when to give up and live to fight another day. Humans throw their lives away for nothing and then pretend it was heroic. The lesson continued for another hour. The aliens showed more videos of human battles from different wars throughout history. They pointed out every mistake, every time humans had charged into hopeless situations. They laughed at human tactics and called them primitive and foolish. Jake watched it all in silence. He saw the Battle of Britain, where a few pilots had fought against overwhelming odds. He saw D-Day, where thousands of soldiers had stormed beaches despite terrible dangers. He saw Vietnam, where small units had held positions against much larger forces. The aliens saw only foolishness and waste. They could not understand why humans would fight when they could not win. They thought the smart thing was always to preserve your own life, even if it meant letting others die. But Jake saw something different. He saw ordinary people who had chosen to stand and fight when it mattered most. He saw soldiers who had put their duty above their own safety. He saw warriors who had faced death rather than abandon their friends. Tomorrow we will study the HFY Way of War, Vexel announced as the class ended. You will see how intelligent creatures fight. We use logic and planning. We retreat when we must and attack only when we can win. We do not waste lives on foolish gestures. The alien students filed out of the room, still clicking and chattering about the silly humans and their impossible stories. Jake gathered his papers and prepared to leave. Captain Morrison, Vexel called out as Jake reached the door. I hope you are learning something useful from these lessons. Your people have much to learn about proper warfare. Jake turned back to face the alien commander. For just a moment, his calm expression changed. Something hard and cold flashed in his blue eyes, but then it was gone and he was calm again. Yes, sir, Jake said quietly. I am learning quite a lot. He left the room and walked down the long hallway of the military academy. Other alien officers passed by, most of them much taller than him. Some nodded politely, but he could see the amusement in their eyes. To them, he was just a representative of a weak species that told lies about its past. Jake did not mind their opinions. He had served in 3 wars and commanded troops in battles across 2 star systems. He had seen what humans could do when they were pushed to their limits. He had seen ordinary people become heroes when they had no other choice, the aliens thought. Human stories were lies because they seemed impossible. But Jake knew something the aliens did not understand. Sometimes the impossible was the only option left. And when that happened, humans had a way of making the impossible real. He reached his small quarters and sat down at his desk. Tomorrow there would be another lesson about alien military tactics. There would be more laughter about human foolishness. There would be more jokes about impossible victories and heroic lies. Jake could wait. Someday these aliens might learn the difference between a story and a promise. Someday they might discover that human legends were not tales of the past, but preparations for the future. But for now he would let them laugh. After all, the best lessons were the ones you learned the hard way. 3 weeks passed quietly at the military academy. The alien students continued their training, learning about different weapons and battle tactics from across the galaxy. Jake Morrison attended every class, took notes, and said very little. The other students had stopped paying attention to him. They thought he had learned his place, then everything changed. The emergency alarm woke everyone in the middle of the night cycle. Red lights flashed in the hallways as officers ran to their stations. Jake pulled on his uniform and hurried to the command center along with everyone else. Admiral Zarthok stood at the center of the room. He was a crystalline, which meant his body was made of living crystal that glowed with different colors when he spoke. Right now he was glowing bright red, which meant he was very worried. Officers, the Admiral said, his voice echoing strangely through the crystals in his body. We have received terrible news from the outer colonies. The Void Devourers have returned. A cold silence filled the room. Jake had read about the Void Devourers in his history classes. They were ancient machines that had disappeared thousands of years ago. Most people thought they were just old stories, like monsters from children's tales. The Devourers have destroyed 3 colony worlds in the past week, Admiral Zarthok continued. They are moving toward the inner systems. We must stop them before they reach the core worlds where billions live. Commander Vexahall stepped forward. Sir, how many Devourer ships are we facing? Our scouts report 17 large vessels, the Admiral replied. Each one is bigger than our largest battleships. But we have 43 ships from 12 different species gathering at Kepler Station. We will meet them there and destroy them. The alien officers looked confident. 43 ships against 17 seemed like good odds to them. They had been taught that numbers were the most important thing in space battles. More ships meant victory, Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Hayes won. Of the few other humans in the Defense Corps stepped up to the tactical display. She was a small woman with short blonde hair and sharp green eyes. She had been Jake's friend since they both joined the exchange program. Admiral, Lisa said, intelligence reports show the Devourer ships moving in a very tight formation. They are not spreading out like normal fleets do. Jake studied the tactical display that showed the enemy formation. Something about the way the Devourer ships were arranged bothered him. It reminded him of something he had seen before, but he could not remember what. Admiral Zarthak's crystals pulsed with confidence. Their tight formation will make them easier targets for our weapons. We will surround them and attack from all sides. Sir, Jake spoke up. Several alien officers turned to look at him with surprise. He rarely spoke in these meetings. I recommend we take defensive positions around Kepler Station instead of attacking directly. Commander Vexahall made the clicking sound that meant he was amused. Captain Morrison, we have more than twice as many ships as they do. This is the perfect time for an aggressive attack. Why would we hide behind the station like frightened children? Sometimes the best way to attack is to make the enemy come to you. Jake replied calmly. Vexahall's 4 arms waved in a gesture of dismissal. More human cowardice disguised as wisdom. Admiral, the human is letting his fear cloud his judgment. We should ignore his advice and press our advantage while we have it. Other alien officers nodded in agreement. They had been taught that retreat or defensive action was always a sign of weakness. Strong warriors attacked. Only the weak defended. Major Susan Clark, another human officer, looked worried. She was in charge of intelligence gathering and had been studying the Devourer ships for days. Captain Morrison might have a point, she said. The Devourers survived for thousands of years before they disappeared. They might know tactics we have never seen. Nonsense, said Captain Moran of the Aquilan Navy. He was a tall blue creature with gills on his neck. These are old machines, using ancient technology. Our modern weapons will cut through them easily. Admiral Zarthok listened to the debate, his crystals changing colors as he thought. Finally, they settled on a bright blue, which meant he had made his decision. We will attack, he announced. All ships will advance to attack formation as soon as we reach Kepler Station. We will show these ancient machines what modern warfare looks like. The other officers cheered and made various sounds of approval. They were excited about the coming battle. They thought it would be easy to defeat enemies from the distant past. Jake said nothing more. He had given his advice, and it had been rejected. That was how military command worked. The Admiral made the decisions, and everyone else followed orders. The journey to Kepler Station took 2 days. During that time, Jake spent his free hours studying everything he could find about the Void Devourers. Most of the records were very old and hard to understand. The Devourers had appeared suddenly thousands of years ago, destroyed many worlds, and then vanished just as quickly. What worried Jake was how they had vanished. The old records did not say they had been defeated in some great battle. They just stopped attacking and disappeared into deep space. That suggested they had left by choice, not because they had been beaten. Lisa Hayes found Jake in the ship's library on the second day. She sat down across from him at the metal table where he was reading. You look worried, she said quietly. Jake looked up from the old records on his datapad. Something about their formation bothers me. The way they move together like they are all controlled by one mind. Most people think they are just machines, Lisa replied. Simple robots following old programming. Maybe, Jake said. But what if they are not simple? What if they learned and grew during all those years they were gone? Lisa was quiet for a moment. She trusted Jake's instincts. He had been a soldier longer than most of the alien officers, and he had a way of seeing things others missed. What do you think we should do? She asked. Jake closed his datapad and looked out the small window at the stars. I think we should be ready for surprises. The Devourers did not survive this long by being predictable. They reached Kepler Station the next morning. The station was huge, built around an old asteroid in the Kepler system. Thousands of people lived and worked there, including many families of military personnel. It was one of humanity's newest and most important outposts. The Allied fleet gathered around the station like a protective cloud. Ships from many different worlds floated in formation, their weapons powered and ready. The crews were confident and eager for battle. Jake stood on the bridge of the flagship with the other senior officers. Through the main window, he could see the beautiful blue and white planet that Kepler Station protected. Millions of people lived on that world, trusting the military to keep them safe. Long-range sensors are detecting the Devourer fleet, reported Ensign Paul Martinez from the sensor station. He was young, probably fresh out of the academy. They will be here in 6 hours. Admiral Zarthok S. Crystals glowed with anticipation. Excellent. All ships prepare for attack formation. We will meet them head-on and show them the power of the modern galaxy. The alien officers moved quickly to carry out the Admiral's orders. They checked weapons, confirmed communications with other ships, and prepared battle plans. Everyone seemed excited and confident. Jake watched the preparations with a growing sense of unease. The formation the Admiral had chosen put all their ships in one large group. It was exactly the kind of target that would be perfect for an enemy with the right weapons. Admiral, Jake said carefully, perhaps we should spread our ships out more. If we stay bunched together like this, one powerful weapon could damage many ships at once. Commander Vexahol turned his large eyes toward Jake with annoyance. Captain, you already gave your advice to hide behind the station. Now you want us to scatter our forces? These are the tactics of the weak and frightened. A scattered fleet is a weak fleet, agreed Captain Moron. We must stay together to support each other. Admiral Zarthok S. Crystals pulsed thoughtfully, but then settled on the same blue color as before. We will maintain formation as planned. Unity is strength. Jake nodded and said nothing more. He had done his duty by giving his advice. Now all he could do was hope he was wrong about his bad feeling. The hours passed slowly as they waited for the enemy to arrive. Jake spent the time checking and rechecking the ship's defensive systems. He made sure all the emergency procedures were ready and that the crew knew what to do if things went badly. Finally, the long-range sensors detected the approaching Devourer fleet. Jake watched the tactical display as 17 large dots moved steadily toward them. The enemy ships were massive, each one 3 times the size of their biggest cruiser. All ships, attack formation, Admiral Zarthok commanded. Today we will show the galaxy that the age of the Void Devourers is over forever. The Allied fleet moved forward to meet the enemy, 43 ships against 17. On paper, it looked like an easy victory. Jake hoped the paper was right. But something deep in his soldier's instincts told him they were about to learn a very hard lesson about underestimating ancient enemies. The battle began at exactly 1400 hours ship time. The Allied fleet moved forward in their tight formation, weapons charged and ready. Admiral Zarthok stood at the center of the bridge, his crystal body glowing bright with confidence. Fire. When in range, he commanded, the first shots came from the Aquilin cruisers. Bright blue energy beams shot across space toward the 17 Devourer ships. The alien officers watched eagerly, expecting to see the ancient enemy ships explode under their modern weapons, but the energy beams hit some kind of invisible barrier around the Devourer ships. The attack spread out like water hitting a wall, doing no damage at all. Shields, said Commander Vexahol, though he sounded less confident than before. Old technology, but still working. All ships, concentrate fire on the lead vessel, Admiral. Zarthok ordered. 43 ships turned their weapons toward the largest Devourer ship. The space between the fleets lit up with energy beams, missile trails, and plasma blasts. It was the most firepower Jake had ever seen in one place. The combined attack struck the lead Devourer ship. For a moment, Jake thought they had succeeded. The enemy ship disappeared in a bright flash of light and explosions, but when the light faded, the ship was still there. Its dark metal hull showed no damage at all. The invisible barrier around it had absorbed everything they could throw at it. "Impossible," whispered Captain Moron. "Nothing can withstand that much firepower." That was when the Devourers began. To fight back, the 17 enemy ships suddenly spread out from their tight formation. They moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. In seconds, they had surrounded the Allied fleet on all sides. "Evasive maneuvers," Admiral Zarthok shouted. "All ships break formation and scatter," but it was too late. The Devourers had chosen their moment perfectly. The Allied ships were packed together in their attack formation, making them easy targets. The first Devourer weapon was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. A beam of pure darkness shot out from the lead enemy ship. It did not glow or flash like normal energy weapons. Instead, it seemed to eat the light around it, leaving a black line across space. The beam hit the crystalline battleship Bright Hope. The huge ship simply disappeared. One moment it was there with 5,000 crew members aboard. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space. "What happened to the Bright Hope?" Lisa Hayes asked from her position at the tactical station. "I do not know," Admiral Zarthok replied, his crystal body flickering with confusion. "It just vanished." More dark beams shot out from the Devourer ships. Each one made another Allied vessel disappear completely. There were no explosions, no debris, no escape pods. The ships were just gone. "All ships emergency scatter pattern," Jake called out, even though he was not in command. "Get away from each other now." Some of the alien captains listened to him. Others continued trying to fight in formation. Those who stayed together died together as the dark beams swept through them. The Devourer ships moved with perfect coordination. They did not get in each other's way or waste shots on the same target. It was like they were all controlled by one mind, working together as a single weapon. The Allied fleet tried to fight back, but their weapons could not penetrate the enemy shields. Meanwhile, the Devourers were destroying Allied ships faster than Jake could count them. "Hull breach on deck." 7. Ensign Paul Martinez reported from his station. Blood was running down his face from a cut on his forehead. "We have lost main engines." Their ship shook as another Devourer beam passed close by. The lights flickered and several control panels exploded in showers of sparks. "Damage report," Admiral Zarthok demanded. "Weapons offline," reported the weapons. "Officer, shields at 20%. Life support is failing on decks 4 through 6. Jake looked at the tactical display. In less than 1 hour, they had lost 28 ships. The remaining 15 were scattered and badly damaged. Many were barely able to move. "Sir," Lisa Hayes said quietly, "we need to retreat to the station." Admiral Zarthok's crystal body was flickering weakly. He had been injured when a control panel exploded near him. "All remaining ships," he said, his voice much dimmer than before, "fall back to Kepler Station. We will make our stand there." The surviving ships limped back toward the station. Jake watched the tactical display as the Devourer ships followed them slowly. The enemy was not in a hurry. They knew the Allied fleet was beaten. "Why are they not finishing us off?" asked Commander Vexahol. His forearms were shaking and his confident voice was gone. "Because they want the station," Jake replied. "They did not come here just to destroy our ships. They want something on Kepler Station." The retreat to the station was a nightmare. 3 more Allied ships were destroyed during the withdrawal. The Devourers picked off the slowest and most damaged vessels with their terrible dark beams. When the surviving 12 ships reached Kepler Station, Jake could see the fear in everyone's eyes. The alien officers who had been so confident a few hours ago now looked lost and confused. They gathered in the station's main command center for an emergency meeting. The room was full of injured officers and crew members from the destroyed ships, who had been rescued by the survivors. "Status report?" Admiral Zarthak asked weakly. His crystal body was now very dim, and cracks were visible in his structure. Major Susan Clark stood up from her position at the intelligence station. "Long-range sensors show the Devourer ships are regrouping. They will reach the station in approximately 6 hours. Station defenses?" The Admiral asked. Commander Vexahol looked at his datapad with shaking hands. "Minimal, sir. We never expected to need them with such a large fleet protecting us. We have some defensive guns, but they are not designed to stop ships that size." "Evacuation?" suggested Captain Moron. His blue skin had turned pale, and his gills were moving rapidly with fear. Jake studied the tactical display showing the station and the surrounding space. He could see the problem immediately. "There is nowhere to run," he said quietly. "The Devourers will catch any evacuation ships long before they reach the next system." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Jake meant. The station held 50,000 civilians from many different worlds. There were families, children, elderly people, and workers who had never been in a battle. They could not all be evacuated in time. "The nearest reinforcements?" asked Lisa Hayes. 4 days away at minimum," Major Clark replied. "Even if we sent a message right now, help would not arrive in time." Jake looked around the room at the defeated faces of the other officers. These were the same aliens who had laughed at human military stories just weeks ago. They had been so sure that their modern tactics and superior numbers would win any battle. Now they were facing an enemy that had turned their advantages into weaknesses. The Devourers had used the Allied fleet's tight formation against them. They had surrounded the overconfident attackers and destroyed them piece by piece. "What do we do?" asked a young Zephyrian officer. "How do we fight an enemy we cannot hurt?" Jake stood up slowly. He was one of the few officers in the room who was not injured. His uniform was torn and dirty, but he was still able to stand straight. "Commander Vexahol," he said, turning to face the alien officer who had mocked him so often. "You asked me about human legends weeks ago. You wanted to know about our stories of impossible last stands." Vexahol looked up at Jake with confusion. "Captain, this is not the time for stories." "Actually," Jake replied, "this is exactly the time for stories. You see, you were right about one thing. Humans do have many legends about impossible battles. But you were wrong about something else." Jake moved to the tactical display and began highlighting different sections of the station. "You thought our legends were lies and fantasies, but they are not. They are instruction manuals." Admiral Zarthak's dim crystals flickered with interest. "Explain." "Every human child learns about the Battle of Thermopylae," Jake continued. 300 Spartans held off hundreds of thousands of Persian soldiers. But they did not do it by being stronger or having better weapons. They chose the right ground to fight on. Jake pointed to the station's layout on the display. The Spartans picked a narrow pass where the enemy could only attack a few soldiers at a time. The Persians' numbers became useless because they could not use them all at once. The other officers began to pay attention. Jake had their interest now. "The defenders at the Alamo knew they could not win," Jake said. "But they held out long enough for their army to prepare for the final battle. The men at Rorke's Drift used the mission buildings to force the Zulu warriors into kill zones where their superior numbers meant nothing." Jake highlighted different parts of the station on the tactical display. "This station has narrow corridors, defensive positions, and choke points. If we evacuate all civilians to the central core and seal the outer sections, we can force the Devourers to come at us a few at a time." "But Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Rachel Stone, "we are talking about fighting machines that have been perfecting warfare for thousands of years." Jake's eyes grew hard with determination. "Then we will teach them what humans have been perfecting for just as long." The room was quiet as the officers thought about Jake's words. They had spent weeks laughing at human military stories. Now those same stories might be their only hope for survival. Jake stood in front of the tactical display, his finger pointing at different sections of Kepler Station. The other officers watched him carefully, no longer laughing or making jokes about human stories. The terrible battle they had just lost had changed everything. The key to understanding human warfare, Jake said, is knowing that we are usually the weaker side. We are smaller, we have fewer numbers, and our enemies often have better weapons. So we learned how to turn weakness into strength. Commander Vexahall leaned forward in his chair. His forearms were no longer shaking, and he was listening closely to every word Jake said. How do you turn weakness into strength? By making the enemy fight on your terms instead of theirs, Jake replied. He touched the display, and it showed a picture of a narrow mountain pass. At Thermopylae, the Persians had hundreds of thousands of soldiers. But the Spartans chose to fight in a place where only a few Persian soldiers could attack at one time. Jake changed the display to show the station's corridors. These hallways are like that mountain pass. The Devourers might have thousands of machines, but they can only send a few through each corridor at a time. Admiral Zarthok's crystal body flickered weakly, but his voice was stronger. Continue, Captain. The men who defended the Alamo knew they were going to die, Jake said. But they also knew that every hour they held out gave their main army more time to prepare. Every Devourer machine we destroy here is one less machine attacking the core worlds. Major Susan Clark stood up from her position. But Captain, the Devourers have those dark beam weapons. They can destroy our ships from a distance. Why would they bother with boarding the station? Jake smiled grimly. Because they want something here. Think about it. If they just wanted to destroy the station, they would have done it already. Those dark beams could turn this entire place into dust in minutes. Lisa Hayes looked at her intelligence reports. The captain is right. They are moving their ships into boarding positions, not attack positions. They plan to come inside. What could they want? Asked Captain Moran. Information, Jake replied. This station has the main communications hub for the entire sector. Every military message, every troop movement, every defense plan passes through here. If they capture it intact, they will know everything about our defenses. The room was quiet, as everyone understood what this meant. The Devourers were not just trying to destroy one station. They were trying to gather information that would help them conquer the entire galaxy. So we make sure they do not get it, Jake continued. We evacuate all civilians to the central core and seal it off. Then we turn the outer sections into a maze of death traps. Jake began highlighting different areas on the station map. Every corridor becomes a kill zone. Every intersection becomes a fortress. Every room becomes a battlefield where we choose the ground. But how do we fight machines that our weapons cannot hurt? Asked Ensign Paul Martinez. The young officer's face was bandaged, but his eyes were alert. We do not fight their ships, Jake explained. We fight their boarding parties. Those machines have to come inside to get what they want. Once they are in our corridors, their shields and heavy weapons will not help them. Jake pulled up records of different human battles on the display. During World War II, human soldiers learned how to fight in cities and buildings. They called it urban warfare. The key was making the enemy come to you in small groups. He showed pictures of soldiers fighting in narrow streets and damaged buildings. You block some corridors and leave others open. You force the enemy to come the way you want them to come. Then you hit them from positions they cannot see. Commander Vexahall studied the images carefully. This is very different from fleet combat. It is more like hunting than fighting. Exactly, Jake said. And humans have been hunters for thousands of years before we became soldiers. Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Hayes moved to another part of the display. What about weapons? Our energy guns? Barely scratched their ship hulls. Their ships have powerful shields, Jake replied. But individual machines walking through corridors will not have the same protection, and we have more than energy weapons. Jake opened another section of the tactical display. This station has a full workshop and manufacturing area. We can make explosive devices, set up traps, and create weapons they will not expect. Improvised weapons? Asked Major Clark. The simplest weapons are often the most effective, Jake said. A piece of metal pipe filled with explosives can kill just as well as an expensive missile, and it is much harder to detect or stop. Admiral Zarthok's crystals pulsed thoughtfully. You are talking about turning this entire station into a trap. Not a trap, Jake corrected. A fortress, but a very special kind of fortress. One that fights back. Jake changed the display to show the station's power systems. We can control the lights, the air, the gravity, and the temperature in every section. We can make their machines work harder just to move around. Environmental warfare, Lisa said with understanding. Make every step they take cost them energy. Right, Jake nodded. And while they are struggling with our environment, we hit them from hiding places they cannot predict. Commander Vexahol was beginning to look excited for the first time since the battle. This could actually work, but we will need to coordinate everything perfectly. That is where human military training comes in, Jake said. Every human soldier learns to fight as part of a small team. We do not need big formations or complex plans. We just need people who can think for themselves and work together. Jake looked around the room at all the alien officers. How many total military personnel do we have on the station? Major Clark checked her datapad. 1,500, counting everyone from the destroyed ships who made it to the station. And how many are trained for ground combat? About 800. The rest are ship crew and support personnel. Jake nodded. 800 trained fighters, plus whatever civilians want to help defend their homes. Against machines that have to come through narrow corridors to reach us. What about the civilians? Asked Captain Moron. 50,000 people cannot all fight. They do not have to fight, Jake replied. But they can help in other ways. Some can carry ammunition, some can treat wounded soldiers, some can help build defenses. And the most important thing they can do is stay alive. Jake's expression became very serious. That is what all these human legends are really about. Not dying gloriously, but staying alive long enough to matter. Every minute we hold out gives the evacuation ships more time to reach safe space. Every hour we fight gives the main fleet more time to prepare for the real battle. Admiral Zarthok stood up slowly, his crystal body glowing brighter than it had since he was injured. Captain Morrison, I am placing you in command of the station's defense. You seem to understand this type of fighting better than any of us. Several alien officers looked surprised, but none of them argued. They had seen what happened when they ignored human advice. Thank you, sir, Jake said, but I will need help from everyone here. This is not the kind of battle one person can plan alone. Lisa. Hayes stepped forward. What do you need us to do? Jake looked at the tactical display one more time, then turned to face the group of officers. First, we evacuate all civilians to the central core and seal it off completely. Then we divide our fighters into small teams and assign each team to a specific section of the station. He pointed to different areas on the map. Each team will be responsible for preparing their area for defense. They will set up obstacles, create hiding places, and plant traps. When the Devourers come, each team will fight in their own section. What if a team gets overwhelmed? Asked Commander Vexahol. Then they fall back to the next section and keep fighting, Jake replied. This is not about holding every position forever. It is about making the enemy pay for every meter they advance. Major Clark was taking notes on her datapad. How long do we need to hold out? The longer the better, Jake said. But even a few hours will help. Every machine we destroy here is one less machine attacking innocent people somewhere else. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone thought about what they were planning to do. They were going to turn a peaceful space station into a battlefield and fight an enemy that had just destroyed most of their fleet. Are we really going to do this? Asked Ensign Martinez. Jake looked at the young officer and saw the fear in his eyes. But he also saw determination. We are going to try, Jake said. Simply because someone has to. Outside the station, the Devourer ships continued their slow approach. In a few hours, they would arrive and begin their boarding operation. They expected to find a defeated enemy, ready to surrender. Instead, they were going to discover what happened when humans decided to make a stand. They were going to learn that some legends were not stories about the past, but promises about the future, and they were going to find out why other species had learned to respect those promises. The Void Devourers arrived exactly when the sensors predicted they would. Jake watched from the station's command center as the 17 massive ships surrounded Kepler Station. Like metal vultures circling their prey, the alien ships were even more frightening up close. Each one was as long as a city block and covered in dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols glowed red along their hulls, and Jake could see mechanical arms extending from their sides. "Why are they not attacking?" asked Commander Vexahal. His voice was quiet, but Jake could hear the fear behind his words. "Because they want what is inside," Jake replied. "If they destroy the station, they destroy the information they came for." As if to prove his point, the Devourer ships began, extending long metal tubes toward the station. These were boarding tubes, designed to let the machines enter the station without damaging the important computer systems. "All teams, report status," Jake said into his communication device. "One by one," the team leaders checked in. Sergeant Amy Rodriguez was in Sector 7 with 12 other soldiers. She had spent the last 4 hours turning the corridors into a maze of explosive traps and hidden positions. Corporal Danny Walsh was alone in Sector 12, guarding one of the most important choke points on the station. He had volunteered for the dangerous job because he was the best marksman they had, Lieutenant. Commander Rachel Stone was in Sector 5 with a mixed team of human and alien soldiers. They had worked together to set up crossfire positions that would catch any enemy coming through the main corridors. "All teams ready," Jake announced to the command center. "Civilians are secure in the central core. All outer sections are prepared for defensive action." Admiral Zarthok stood beside Jake, his crystal body glowing with nervous energy. "Captain, I want you to know that whatever happens today, you have already proven your point about human military doctrine." Jake nodded but kept his eyes on the tactical display. The first boarding tubes were making contact with the station's hull. In minutes, the Devourers would be inside. "Contact in Sector 7, came Sergeant Rodriguez's voice over the communication system. "I can see them cutting through the airlock." Jake switched the display to show Sector 7. Through the security cameras, he could see sparks flying as the Devourer machines cut through the metal doors. These machines looked like metal skeletons walking upright, with glowing red eyes and weapons built into their arms. "Remember," Jake said to all teams, "let them come in. Do not fire until they are exactly where you want them." The first group of Devourer machines stepped through the airlock into Sector 7. There were about 20 of them, moving in perfect formation. Their metal feet made no sound as they walked down the corridor. They had taken exactly 10 steps when Sergeant Rodriguez triggered her first trap. Explosive charges built into the walls detonated on both sides of the corridor. The explosion crushed 6 machines instantly and damaged several others, but the remaining machines did not panic or retreat like living soldiers might have done. They simply stepped over their destroyed companions and kept moving forward. "They do not care about losses," Rodriguez reported. "They are not afraid of dying." "Good," Jake replied. "Fear would make them smarter. Keep leading them into your kill zones." More boarding tubes attached to different sections of the station. Soon, Devourer machines were entering from 12 different locations. Jake watched the tactical display as red dots representing enemy forces spread through the outer sections. In Sector 12. Corporal Walsh waited patiently as a group of 15 machines approached his position. He was hidden in a maintenance shaft above the main corridor, with his plasma rifle aimed at the exact spot where the enemies would have to pass. The machines moved in single file through the narrow corridor, just as Jake had predicted. When the first one reached the kill zone, Walsh opened fire. His first shot destroyed the lead machine. His second shot got the one behind it, The remaining machines looked up toward Walsh's position and began firing their own weapons. But Walsh was already moving through the maintenance shafts to his next position. By the time the machines reached where he had been, he was gone. Sector 12, one enemy group delayed, Walsh reported, moving to secondary position. In Sector 5, Lieutenant Commander Stone and her mixed team faced a larger group of machines. 40 Devourers were trying to push through the main corridor that led toward the station's computer core. Stone had positioned her team in 3 different rooms along the corridor. As the machines advanced, her soldiers would fire from one room, then fall back to the next room while another group opened fire from a different angle. The Devourers found themselves caught in a deadly crossfire. Every time they turned to attack one group of soldiers, another group would hit them from behind or from the side. The machines were efficient killers, but they were programmed to fight in open space, not in the tight confines of a space station. The corridor fighting is working, Stone reported, but we are running low on ammunition. Fall back to your secondary positions, Jake ordered. Make them chase you through every prepared kill zone. Hour after hour, the battle raged through the station's corridors. The Devourer machines pushed forward steadily, but every meter cost them dozens of destroyed units. What should have been a quick boarding action turned into a grinding war of attrition. The human soldiers fought with a desperation that surprised their alien teammates. Private Helen Curtis, who had been an engineer before the battle, found herself fighting alongside Commander Vexahol in Sector 3. "How do you stay so calm?" Vexahol asked during a brief break in the fighting. "We are facing certain death." Curtis reloaded her rifle without taking her eyes off the corridor ahead. "This is not about certain death, Commander. This is about making sure our deaths count for something." Vexahol watched as Curtis picked off 3 more Devourer machines with precise shots. He was beginning to understand what Jake had meant about human military doctrine. These soldiers were not trying to live forever. They were trying to buy time with their lives. In the command center, Jake coordinated the defense while monitoring casualty reports. They were losing people, but slowly. More importantly, they were destroying far more Devourer machines than anyone had thought possible. "Captain," Major Clark reported, "long-range sensors are detecting multiple fleet signatures approaching our position. It looks like the reinforcements are finally coming." Jake felt a surge of hope, but he tried not to show it. "How long until they arrive?" 4 hours minimum, probably closer to 5. Jake looked at the tactical display. The Devourers had taken control of 70% of the station. His people were falling back to the final defensive line around the civilian shelters. The enemy was pushing harder now, sending larger groups of machines through each corridor. "All teams," Jake announced. "The cavalry is coming. We just need to hold for 4 more hours." The response from his soldiers was immediate and determined. They had been fighting for 8 hours already, but knowing that help was coming gave them new strength. Admiral Zarthok, despite his injuries, had insisted on taking a position at the front lines. His crystal body was cracked and dim, but his voice was still strong. "Captain Morrison, your species' legends have proven to be remarkably accurate tactical manuals." "We are not done yet, Admiral," Jake replied. "The last stand is not about dying gloriously. It is about holding long enough for that glory to mean something." The final assault came 3 hours later. The Devourers, perhaps sensing that reinforcements were approaching, launched a massive coordinated attack. Thousands of machines poured through the station's corridors in a desperate push toward the central core. Jake's remaining 400 defenders faced impossible odds. But they had turned every corridor into a fortress and every room into a battlefield. The Devourers had superior numbers and better weapons, but the humans had something more important. They had hope. When the relief fleet finally arrived, they found Kepler Station scarred and smoking, but still intact. The central core where the civilians had been sheltered was undamaged. The computer systems the Devourers had come for were destroyed, but the people were safe. Of the 1,500 defenders who had started the battle, less than 200 survived. But 50,000 civilians lived because a group of soldiers had decided to make a stand. In the medical bay afterward, Commander Vexahol found Jake getting treatment for his wounds. The human captain had burns on his face and his left arm was in a sling, but he was alive. "Captain," Vexil said quietly, "I owe you an apology. Your legends ... they were never myths at all, were they?" Jake managed a tired smile despite his injuries. "No, Commander. They were promises. Promises that when the darkness comes, someone will stand in its way. Not because they can win, but because someone has to try." Vexil's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "And that is what makes humans dangerous." Jake shook his head slowly. "No, Commander. That is what makes humans human. The dangerous part is that we are very good at keeping our promises." As word of the Battle of Kepler Station spread throughout the galaxy, something fundamental changed. In how other species viewed humanity, the laughter stopped. The mockery ended. Because everyone now understood that human legends were not fantasies about the past, they were instruction manuals for the future.